Welcome to Sew Very Easy. My name is Laura, and let's take 1 yard of fabric and 1 yard of fleece and turn it into a nice big basket with a handle. The 1 yard of fabric could be the same fabric or a half a yard of two different fabrics. So we're going to have a fabric for the outside and a fabric for the inside. If you use one fabric, we do need to divide that in half, so we have 2 half yards. When you buy the fleece, be sure to buy the fleece so that you have the same amount in measurements as you do your fabric. We're going to cut that in half so we have 2 pieces of the fleece. So for my stack, I have my half yard, half yard, half yard of the fleece, and a second half yard of the fleece. The fleece that I'm going to be using today is from Fairfield. It's a low loft fleece, and it's fusible on one side. Both the pieces of fleece need to be cut in an identical way and in an identical size. I find working with my fleece folded in half and my fabrics folded in half will just make it easy to visualize. The fleece needs to be straightened up, and we can keep that fold because that's going to be the bottom. What we are looking for is that fleece to be a little bit smaller than our fabric. A half a yard is 18 inches, so I have 18 inches. By that full width, which is 45 inches, I can put both pieces together and trim them together. It won't matter what size your fleece is, as long as it's just smaller than your fabric. I'm going to do some marking on my fleece and cut it all together. The first thing we need to do is make the handles of the basket. Measure down 5 inches and put a mark, and measure over 5 inches and put a mark, and then draw from point to point. So I have a 5-inch triangle drawn on that one corner. Repeat for the second corner and find your middle line and just draw down a couple inches. This area we need to draw a handle. You can free motion an oval if you'd like, or use approximately a 3.5-inch circle. We need about 1 inch to 1.5 inches up at the top, and draw that circle or your oval shape. The next mark, we need to do the bottom, and that's going along the fold. We need to draw a 5-inch square. Repeat that 5-inch on the second corner where that fold is. That's all the markings we're going to need. And once all of our edges are matched, we're going to be able to cut off those corner triangles and cut out these 2 5-inch squares in the bottom. And we can put these aside for another project. What we have left is this circle to cut out. We're not going to be able to cut out all 4 layers at the same time, but we will be able to cut out 2 at a time. But I do recommend pinning those layers together, and that way they're just not going to shift as we're cutting. And just keep the pins so that they're out of that circle and we won't have to remove them. Put a cut in the center, cut out that circle. Because I've kept those layers together, I'm going to use that circle and just trace it. Remove those pins, move that first layer out of the way, pin, and cut out that second hole. When I open up that fleece, I have a very odd shape, but both the pieces of fleece are identical. I'm going to fuse these onto my fabric. The wrong side of the fabric needs to be ironed on to that glue part of the fusible fleece, and there's room all the way around the fleece. We can now iron this fleece onto the fabric. Though I do find it's easier if you bring it to the ironing board to iron it from the fabric side. And I need to do that to both pieces of fabric. With those layers fused together, we're going to cut out the shape. We need to leave a seam allowance. You can leave a 1/2-inch seam allowance or a 1/4 inch, whatever you feel comfortable stitching with. And just take the rotary cutter and add whatever seam allowance you want. And in this case, I'm going to use 1/2 inch. So I'm going to do a 1/2-inch seam allowance all the way around. With your seam allowance cut out, we now can work on these little holes, which are the handles. We want to take the fabric and have it come around, covering this fleece. So cut out a little circle in the center. You do not need to measure. From here we need to cut little slits right up until that fleece. So it's like we're cutting into a pie shape and go all the way around. We're going to be able to take these pieces and have them all come towards the inside. So we're going to need to add a little bit of glue, and any glue you want to use is fine. And I do like using the children's glue sticks. They work just fine. So I'm going to just glue and then just roll that down. We need to do all 4 handles this way and add our seam allowance on both pieces. Now we can fold this in half so the fabrics are touching. Line up that handle and the fabric edges. For the outside fabric, we need to do a row of stitching along each edge. We're not coming up to the top, just this long edge. And stitch as close as you can right to this fleece. Backstitch, stitch up, and backstitch. With those 2 sides stitched together, we can now stitch the bottom. If you'd like, you can take this to the iron and press that seam open. This is definitely a lot easier to do it now while the bag is big and open. We can now stitch these corner bottoms. This edge needs to be stitched along that edge. So if we take those 2 corners and pull, those seams are going to match up. So that side of the bag is going to go towards the center of the bag. And stitch as close as you can to the fleece. Now if this bottom doesn't match up perfect, that's fine. Just stitch and do as straight as a line as you can. Even if you stitch through the fleece, it's fine. Stitch this side together and that second side. With those 2 bottoms stitched, we can see that shape of the bag. We need to repeat this for the lining side. The only difference is, however, we need to leave an opening so we can turn the whole bag right side out when it's stitched together. So stitch a little bit on one side, stitch a little on the other, then on the second side, do the full seam and finish off the bottom. We have the outside bag done and the lining bag. Turn the lining so that it's right side out. And we do have that opening in that one seam. Match up the side seams and slide those 2 together. And then we're going to be able to match up that handle along the top. Once that top is pinned together, we can stitch those layers. You might find it easier to do a section at a time, remove the pins, and then do the second sections. We just need to stitch all the way around. When that edge is all stitched together, we're going to be able to turn that bag right side out, and it'll all fit through that nice big hole we left. When we have both sides out, we can take that lining and put it inside the bag. We now have these 2 big holes, but when we line up the top edges, those holes are going to match together. You can match those up and do a row of top stitching to secure those handles so that all those layers are together, and do a row of top stitching all the way around the outside, matching up those edges. I reinforced the handle with 3 rows of stitching, and that's going to give it some security. Once we have all the top stitching done, the handles done, we can go inside and close up that little opening. If you hand stitch that closed, the bag is actually reversible. But you can always do a machine stitch and just have the lining, and the bag, the bag. The side of the bag is about 12 inches. The top of the bag is just a little bit over 16 inches. And in my case, my bag bottom is 10 inches by 8 inches. So it really is a good size bag. Now because I've used tractor fabric, this is going to be fun for some toys. But with a bag this size, there are many different things that we can store in it. And it definitely would be a great size for our knitting. 1 yard of fabric, 1 yard of fleece gives us a sort of basket with handles. It can be used as a tote bag, but it does stand up on its own, and it can remain open if we need it to be open. Now I used some fun tractor fabric, but I could definitely imagine this in many different fabrics. Thank you for joining me today on Sew Very Easy. Feel free to subscribe, and as always, come on back. Let's see what we're sewing next time in the sewing room. Bye for now.